Well, congratulations, Mike. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Thank
That
you.
was that's the third time I've seen
Third.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah,
I've seen it a few more times than
each
that, but
each time I get more out of
good,
it. You see
good.
something in it.
Okay, that's good.
It's rich in content, and
Mhm. Mhm.
it's fantastic. Um, yeah, I mean it's a totally fascinating and absorbing film about the creative process, and in fact I don't think I've heard the an artist describe their process with such clarity and precision, and such generosity as you managed to get from Anthony there. No, it was really good. So, um, Mike, you have a career as a cinematographer spanning over 4 decades.
Really, is it as long
Yeah,
as that?
yeah.
Is it really?
I did
Okay.
the research. It was over 4 decades. I mean, we could have several Q&As here.
Yeah.
I don't,
Okay.
we wouldn't scratch the
Right.
surface,
Right.
but it's a rich and varied CV, which includes
Mhm.
documentaries,
Mhm.
television drama, music
Mhm.
videos, commercials, and feature
Yeah.
films. And among the feature film directors, you've worked with Ken Russell, Derek Jarman, Jodie Foster. You have picked up awards from the ASC, BAFTA, and of course you have a Pre-Italia.
Pre-Italia. The
Yes, you
first one
do.
I got. Yeah.
First one you got. So no slouch, you, I think it's fair to say. Um, so you could be putting your feet up, really. But it's to your immense credit that you haven't done that and you've thrown yourself into filmmaking. Uh, and in a sort of what you might call a career reset. I
I
think
think
that's
reset is a very good word.
as
Yeah.
a, it's a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
word,
Yeah.
yes. So let's dive straight
Okay.
in.
Yeah.
So tell us, how did this film come about?
The film came about because when I decided that I wasn't really enjoying doing features anymore, I didn't like the way the sort of jobs I was getting offered were going. I felt that in many cases I wasn't really getting to work on the sort of pictures I really wanted to work on, and the jobs that I took, a lot of the time I felt that I was being used to kind of make more of the movie than the budget ever allowed. And I think that came from quite a time spent in music videos, whereas anyone in this room who's ever done music videos, especially around the year 2000, knew that you walked into a studio and 24 hours later you came out with a music video, and really there was a lot of improvisation going on. And that's good fun. That's good fun when you're young and long-haired and it's all rock and roll. But as you get longer in the tooth, you begin to become more and more unhappy, and I think unhappy is the word, with what you're having to do with the money that is being spent on it. So it reached a point where I really thought I wasn't enjoying this anymore, and that's when the reset happened. It so happened that Mia, my wife, and I had decided to change houses, and we had gone from quite a large Victorian pile to what could be described as a modernist house in Ealing. And it meant getting rid of virtually everything that we had in the previous house because it just wasn't going to work. And we did enjoy art, and we wanted to collect more contemporary art than we had in the other house, which meant we went to lots of galleries. Mm-hmm. And it was as we were going to galleries that I suddenly thought, well, I'm not the sort of person to play golf or do that kind of thing if you've stopped doing movies. And I sort of went back to when I was happiest, and I was happiest in BBC Music and Arts doing programmes like Arena and Omnibus and those kind of programmes. And I thought, well, now one can make those kind of films because you don't need a laboratory anymore. You don't need a budget for film. Digital is here. And there are lots of these small, very affordable cameras. And maybe I can start to do something like that. And one of the galleries that we went to a lot, there was a young printmaker called Sophie Layton. And the idea came into my head, shall I make a 10-minute film about Sophie? And obviously Sophie was very happy and the gallery owners were very happy. And a bit like Topsy, it started to grow, and I made a 20-minute film about another painter. And then I made a 30-minute film about another painter. And then I realised that our neighbour from where we previously lived, this old, apparently French woman, we used to have tea with her, and I noticed there was a royal warrant on her wall. And I said, well, what's that for? And she said, oh, no, it's I made a few hats for the Queen. It's not important. And I began to ask her more questions, and I realised that this woman had a massively fascinating life story to tell, including making a few hats for the Queen. In fact, it turned out she'd made nearly 250. And at the same time, I discovered that she was giving lessons to young milliners around this tiny kitchen table, 6 to 8 of them every other weekend, and where not only would she deal with them in terms of being very stern about the discipline of millinery, but she also was deeply in love with them as personalities. And I struck upon this idea I could make a film about her life if I first of all filmed the lessons. And it became this film called The Millinery Lesson. And going from 25 minutes to maybe 30 minutes, I now found myself making a complicated film about someone's life in Paris during the war, the Armenian Holocaust, these lessons, becoming a personal favourite of the Queen, making 250 of her hats, training milliners at the Royal College of Art, and so on and so on. And I found it very natural. I mean, it was difficult at times because I was dealing on my own and trying to find archive material by going to the web because I didn't have budgets to go to film libraries. But I really enjoyed the process. I was editing myself. I was upgrading my editing equipment, thank goodness for Apple, and I was buying another digital camera because there was a slightly better one around. And the cameras I was using were not sort of big digital cameras, they were small, essentially DSLRs. And I really enjoyed using them in that way because whereas before, I'd gone from working on feature films with very big crews, and I'd previously done documentaries at Music and Arts where it would be a cameraman and an assistant. First of all, I was the assistant, then I was the cameraman, and a sound man and a director. They were wonderfully intimate experiences. I now realise that I could make that even more intimate by just literally shooting it and recording the sound myself and just having this essentially one-to-one relationship with the person I was making the film with.
And it was literally just you when you were shooting?
Yeah. With the millinery lesson, there was her son, who was a music teacher, did have someone who was a film composer. And they so liked the idea, they said, we'll do a score for you. So I was able on that one to actually have a score written to the film. That's not always the case. And a lot of the films I've made, I've gone on SoundCloud, I've found a young composer whose work I've liked, I've cut to it, then I've sent them the film and said, please, 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 can I use it? But I don't have any money. And most cases, people say, we'd love you to use it. As long as if you make money, we make some money. And none of these films make money. That's the whole point about it. And in a way, removing the money aspect of it and just making films about what interests you becomes an absolute... It's just fascinating because you're learning so much yourself each time.
Yeah.
And it's gone on and on for that. And so in this gallery, one day there were people there who are at the back of the hall now who we saw a lot, Jeremy and Kate, and they had seen some of my films at the gallery and they turned out to be opera buffs. And they're supporters of the English National Opera. And we talked about opera, and they said, do you go to the opera? And I said, occasionally. I said, but I do remember probably one of the most electrifying moments in live theatre or live music that I'd ever seen was a version of Akhenaten by Philip Glass, done at the Colosseum. I think it was 15 years ago. Excuse me. A very different production from this. But I always loved that. And in fact, when I was travelling to do movies, I always had the Akhenaten CDs with me. And I used to play them on planes. I used to find it a deeply fascinating way of travelling and getting over the boredom of travelling. So Jeremy and Kate said, well, you should make a film because they're going to be making a new version of Akhenaten. and it was way too early to actually, the production was already on the go. But anyway, we went to see it with Jeremy and Kate. Afterwards, I was taken backstage to meet Anthony. And then the decision was taken, make a film that we'll make this film about Anthony Roth-Costanzo and Akhenaten. And we thought, okay, that's fine. We'll just put a treatment together. Somebody's bound to buy it. I mean, you know, this is it. And we went to ENO and they said, yeah, you can make the film, blah, blah, blah. We went everywhere and absolutely nobody was interested whatsoever. I think they may not have felt that I could pull something like this off. Despite, as you say, something of a CV in lots of different disciplines. But we started to approach this problem that we had no funding at all, apart from our own bank accounts, which aren't that large. And at the same time, these rehearsals were coming up at us. There was a definite date. So it was either, okay, abandon the idea and go back to making 20-minute films about a painter. But in the end, I suddenly said to Jeremy, okay, let's just try and make it with what we have. And what we had was a DSLR, a Fuji X-T3, a little DJI Pocket, this little stabilised camera, which I'd used 2 or 3 times on my artist films, because it's just, you just tuck it away and you can do really cool Steadicam shots with it, and it shoots in 4K. And that's essentially what we had.
So it's a bit of a sort of punk ethos to this.
Real punk ethos. And, you know,
great.
I did have an older Panasonic camera, and I realised that for rehearsals, and please sound guys, just cover your ears for a moment. I realised if I put a camera on either side of the rehearsal rooms with our 2 zooms on it, that in fact the sound on each would be a left and right hand channel. So I was able to get the rehearsals in stereo afterwards.
Very good, right.
But, you know, I mean, you had to really think on your feet with this.
Yeah.
But again, it was working with this Fuji particularly. It just allows you to somehow, in a way, the camera disappears. I think you've got to have a good documentary background, and my background was in very, very often very difficult documentaries at the BBC, really difficult places to go, prisons and all kinds of stuff. So you develop certain documentary shooting techniques as a documentary cameraman. But of course, when you start to go down this particular route, you're not only shooting, you're directing, you're interviewing, you're often doing your own sound. It's a lot to take on.
Well, this is going to be my next point,
Good.
really, because I when about some years back when the BBC got me to direct a film. It's the one film I've directed, and I was just the cinematographer and the director, and I found that split really difficult to deal with. But you've do it, as you say, those 2 roles plus producer plus editor, and the personal contact. I mean, how did you manage that?
I don't know, but I did. I mean,
Right.
and it's as simple as that. I mean, it's not as kind of. I mean, I've just done a film with a very interesting painter called Jiro Asuga, and it's essentially me and him in this house that he's having to empty, that he's lived in for 20 years, and now he's been evicted, making this film about both his work and the dilemma he's in. And there's no doubt about it that I live in Ealing, he lives in Streatham, so that's an hour's journey plus in the car and back. And you've spent all that time in the house with him, and you are thinking on your feet. You're thinking on your feet as a director. You're trying to find these very visual moments. I don't go out and slavishly look for cinematography anymore. And I think when we first talked about it, I said it was almost anti-cinematography, in a sense that the cinematography now is very much a back seat in what I do. But that doesn't mean to say that it's not instinctively I'm trying to do stuff. And often I'm not using lights, or I'm resetting people and just taking natural light and seeing how that goes. Sometimes I have some cheap LEDs, some Chinese LED lamps that I've used. All the time I'm not consciously thinking about the cinematography, but I do realise when I'm editing that I've actually done the cinematographer's job as well.
Yeah.
That's going on. But I do come back sometimes and I am really tired, because you've done all of those functions.
I'm sure, yeah.
But it's a good tiredness.
Yeah. But I think it sounds like what propels you is because you haven't got the back end, say, of or the weight, say, of producers, and the production with a capital P behind you, you're just leaning in because you're interested. That's, you just want to learn, as much as capture the sound and the picture, and that's,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
very
that's,
much so.
and that must be a hugely liberating.
I think it is.
aspect.
I think the way, because they're working with the films I've done so far, and they appear to have worked, because most people are very complimentary about them, and I don't think they're just being kind now, because it goes on. There's been a lot of it. I think what I try and do is know enough to make the film, but not too much to not try and make a film that explains to other people. And I think, in the end, I think all of us working in film, as cinematographers, as directors, as composers, as editors, I think that's the way we like to talk. That's the way we like to talk to the world. And it's a lovely way to talk to the world, because you can be very abstract about it. You don't have to. You're not writing a textbook. Mm-hmm. You are dealing with emotional ideas and facts, and at times atmosphere, and you're doing all those kind of things. And I think that probably I never quite found that in features, because of course the process was taken away from you into the cutting room and beyond. I did find it more working in arts documentaries, because you were much more deeply connected with what you were doing, because it was such a small unit. But I think now what I do find is that it's a much deeper knowledge of whatever I am now trying to make a film about. Much deeper knowledge.
Yeah.
And when you're making a film about a painter, if you spend a lot of time with their work, both with them and their work, and also going through their archives, you begin to really get under the surface personally with the work. And you suddenly find it talking to you. I did one film about the 17th century engraver Samuel Palmer, and he made these quite exquisite little etchings, and really little artwork doesn't do it for me, and I like it bigger and more impactful. But I noticed, having spent some time trying to forge this film, and it wasn't easy at times. And then I would go to the gym early morning, and as I walked to the gym and go over the bridge and the sun was up, I suddenly realised I was actually seeing that scene through Samuel Palmer. I could understand it suddenly. And that's what I mean about you find this deeper knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I mean, it's frightening the amount of the films that you do, that one does, and you pick up a little bit of knowledge from each one, but it's only snippets, and you come away thinking, oh yeah, I know about that, but actually you don't. You haven't immersed because you've been slightly separate. Just to the film. So you had a definite start date, which was the start of the rehearsals.
Yes,
right?
we did. Yeah.
And so what was your schedule overall? Did you give yourself a sort of, okay, we're going to do this in so many weeks?
No, not really. I mean, the so many weeks was how long it took from rehearsals to performance.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeremy was having to deal more with the administration of the ENO, and there was not resistance at the top, but there was a certain reluctance to allow any kind of film crew into rehearsals. Because they felt it would, and I think they'd had their fingers burnt by sort of BBC going in at times and really splashing around, and lots of cameras, etc., etc. And there are quite a few of legacy films, particularly about opera, where there were huge kind of confrontations between the television people and the opera people. What was interesting with this was, though, that Felim, the director, did say to me, he says, I love you being here, he says, because rehearsals are better when there's a camera around. Which is an interesting statement.
Yeah.
And that overcame some of the reluctance of some of the administration about allowing us in. And we weren't there every day. We took potluck. Because with those kind of rehearsals, it is potluck. You never know what you're going to get and what you're not going to get. Again, I'm not using rolls and rolls of 16mm film that are going to cost a fortune. It's a card. It's very cost effective. So you can overshoot. And I still have it. I was looking at the drives for this film the other day, and there's there's days of footage of rehearsals, none of which I used because it was never going to be relevant once I began to cut. So we didn't have a schedule. We knew that after the show had finished, that we would have to go to New York to pick up the interviews with Ivory and with his parents, etc. We knew we had to go to Germany for a day on EasyJet to get his piano teacher. Those were the only kind of real schedules that we had.
Right. And when you were in rehearsals, you said we, so how many were you in there?
It would be Jeremy buzzing around making sure everyone was happy, and it would be a camera operator, one guy I know from the gallery, Lewis Rizioni, who has shot a few things for himself with one camera, and me. That was it for rehearsals.
Right.
Nothing else. I mean, I clipped radio mics on people, I had gun mics on the cameras. You know, I used every channel I had on the two cameras, just knowing that at least I had 4 channels of sound, and then somehow or other we'd have to sort this out afterwards. And we couldn't use boards.
Right.
Because we didn't have anyone to put a board on, even if we could have put boards on. So, you know, but then there's no editor yelling at me, why didn't you get boards? You know, because I was the editor.
It's going to be you who'd have to sort it out.
It's going to be me. So, you know, I quickly worked out how you can do it.
Yeah. So the access, you just chose your day to go in, or you just...
Well, we asked questions about what are you doing today, and often Felin might say, well, you know, all we're going to be doing today is run-throughs. You know, I'm not going to be talking to anyone. We're just going to watch it. We're looking for you know, bottlenecks or whatever. And that's not what this film's about. The film is not about the bottlenecks. It's just trying to give a sense of how Felin works, because he has his his own unique way of working on productions. So we wanted to get that. Obviously, we wanted to look at the interaction between Felin and the cast. And as I think you get from what you see here, is this extended rehearsal time does allow the cast to become very involved, because a lot of these big operas, you know, the main singers fly in for 2 days before the performance, and someone says, well, you go here. They work with the conductor quickly, and then that night they go back to the hotel. The next day they fly off to somewhere else in Europe. I mean, that's how opera tends to run, because opera has deep structural problems economically because of the nature of it. But of course, with E&O, everyone is kind of booked and there for a period, which makes it a very different kind of company rehearsal.
Yeah, I mean, the time frames are, enormous. I mean, he was saying that he was on it a year before even entering.
As he says, you don't turn up to opera and learn. You've got to know your score beforehand, and this is not an easy score.
Yeah. And so when in the E&O theatre,
Colosseum,
the same setup. How many cameras did you have there?
For the early rehearsals, I had a camera in each box, and I was down in the stalls with my XT3 and dancing backstage. I was going backstage quite a bit because I wanted for the actual performance to be backstage, and really during performance, they don't want any civilians backstage ever. There's always a danger that a scenery won't come back because you're in the way, or you'll fall out and fall in, whatever. But I did get enough trust from them to actually ask them, and I think it took a couple of times to say, during the performance, I actually want to be backstage and I will not screw it up, and I didn't. Yeah. But that allowed me to find angles that weren't just what the audience see. Akhenaten's interesting visually because it's sort of based on Egyptian hieroglyphs. And one of the visual features of hieroglyphs, there is not a single figure that is ever front on. It's not a face. It's all Egyptian hieroglyphs paint people as profiles. Yeah. And the way that the opera is staged is very much like that. And that meant that capturing it was simpler than some operas. We worked on the principle of having, there's 3 cameras. We borrowed, I think, 3 Sonys. I think we had Brett Latner. Adam Rogers came in for really basic rates. They were really good, as the whole crew did. And I had one camera, which was on a wide. I had a cluster, all in the same spot. And I just told Adam and Roger and Brad, I said, look, this is the way we do it. I have to point out that I love 235 as a format. what it allows me also to do as a one-man band is if I shoot full frame, afterwards in editing, I can do quite a bit of manoeuvring up and down for headroom, for all kinds of things that might take you by surprise when you're shooting and you're asking a question and the subject moves a bit. So I told everybody, and I was shooting in 4K, and I'd done enough of this now in 4K to realise that I can push in a bit and there's not going to be any quality drop. So I said to them, I know you'll never get, and they'd never seen the opera. They came in cold for a whole opera.
Wow.
And I said to them, this is what we're going to do. And Jeremy was with them and sort of saying key moments, make sure you go over there, because he knew the opera. I was backstage, so I couldn't do anything with what they were shooting. I was getting my stuff.
And you had no comms or anything?
No, and you couldn't use comms anyway, because you're on stage, and you know. And what I said to them was, I want everything a little bit wider than you would think. Don't want it wide, but don't get too crowded. Give me a bit of room afterwards. And they did absolutely what I asked them. They never went freelance on that. They never suddenly went into some big close-up. They gave me room afterwards to play with that image. And I know as a cinematographer, if I'd heard me saying that 10 years ago, I would go, and what does it mean, reframing afterwards? You know, I really would.
Yeah.
But it does allow me to take this kind of shoot and make it more sophisticated operating-wise. I mean, for instance, with the wonderful, God, the name's gone, his singing teacher, the beautiful, she was a godsend all the way through. I love her character. But she was a very jumpy person. And I'd followed my own rules. I shot her slightly wider, and I was ready on the panhandle because I could see. But there were 2 or 3 times where she did a really crazy move, and as I edited it, I was able just to really follow her. And it's actually beautiful operating suddenly because it moves with her, and as she settles, the camera settles. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved that in operating, was how operating connects to the subject, and I don't think it's talked about enough. These subtleties of operating, which any operators would know. It's not just keeping someone in frame, it's much bigger than that.
Yes.
It's about the tension of the frame. How much headroom do you have at any point? What are you trying to say emotionally with the headroom in composition? Mm-hmm. I was able to play with those ideas as well. And during some of those sequences, you may or may not notice that often every cut, the image is just moving in slightly. And you were able to build rhythms into the frame to do with the rhythms of the music that weren't there in the footage. Mm-hmm. So you could do your cut, and then every shot you just push in slightly, hardly anything. And what you get is this wonderful feeling of almost moving in but not moving in. So I love exploring those ideas. And they're ideas about editing, they're ideas about structure, and they're ideas about composition.
And did you go back into the cutting room and review and cut and then go back out and shoot? Or did you?
I don't think it was any method. I think I really can't remember now. There was a lot. I mean, my editing took a long time.
Yeah.
But I actually edited the whole opera first because I told the guys just to keep running. So I actually made a kind of cinematic version of the opera, because I really wanted to learn it. And it's a good cut. Can't show it anywhere because it's, we don't have the license to it. But it allowed me to then, as I was cutting the documentary, instead of worrying about this is the bit of opera that works with this, then having to bring it down, then having to cut it, I already had the opera ready. And it actually was a really nice way of working. It would not be a way of working if your cutting room was costing you 1,500 quid a week.
Yeah. No, I can see.
But it's just upstairs in my house. So, I just go up and do something. And I'm still doing it. I mean, the film I've just done, sometimes it would just be, there'd be two spare hours a day, and I'd go up and do maybe one thing to do with one of the artworks. So I love that business of being able to just go upstairs and do it and then come away again.
Very good. Working strange hours, just sort of...
No strange hours.
No.
Millimetre lesson, I did work strange hours. Millimetre lesson, I did work too late. But I began to realise that I wasn't working well. Now I think Mia will say that my hours are very, very social.
Well done, Mia. you had a subject who had a camera pointed at him seemingly from the age of 4, it would seem. I mean, so you had an enormous amount of archive. I mean, that must have taken some sifting through.
Yeah. I mean, basically, Anthony said to us, "Yeah, I've got these old VHSs somewhere in a box," and my ears pricked up, and I was, what is this? And when we finally got hold of them, and I think we had them transferred in New York because they didn't want them leaving the family's possession. So the stuff was sent over to me as files via WeTransfer or something. I can't remember now. And I remember thinking, here we go. There's going to be nothing there. It's just going to be, and then it started to unfold. And suddenly I realised I really did have a way of encapsulating where this boy had come from. Because I was fascinated in his upbringing. And it's the upbringing of how you realise what your child has, and you can either say, no, you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a lawyer, or whatever, or you encourage your child. And if ever this film is about encouraging your child and giving your child room to grow and room to blossom, I mean, this is an object lesson in that.
Yeah.
And luckily, the archive allowed me to do that rather than just his parents saying, and then we did, and then we did.
Yeah.
And as always, we're always trying to show, not tell, especially in documentary. You're always trying to battle. What can you show, excuse me, when the story is being told? So no, it was just glorious. The problem then was picking stuff.
Yeah. I mean, his parents. I mean, it was you could see that it wasn't easy for them, and they were unsure for a lot of it, but they were also enormously proud.
Yeah.
And they were interesting characters. So just talk about the structure, because you've got all that early life with the archive, and then you've got Agnaton. Was it always, were you always going to be doing it linear, the story, or did you?
No, it's a good question, because I thought I can't just make this a linear film, and I actually tried to be clever, and I tried a lot of intercutting, and I suddenly realised, stop being clever, just tell the story, just stay simple. Yes, there are times when you might want to interleave a whole series of ideas in a particular film. Maybe in a film about a painter, it's easier to do it. But really, what I realised was that I was just going to make the story too complicated, and I was trying to show off. So I stripped it back and made it very chronological. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it works. It works well. I mean, but Anthony was also a producer on the film. Was that?
I think that Anthony is a producer on the film in probably the same way that when you see something on Netflix, it's now got 32 producers who just seem to be there. I mean, he's there because Jeremy and I wanted to make sure that he was on board with this. And it made life simpler if we offered him a bit of producing.
Yeah. The documentary has a sort of theatrical experience. So it's interesting that I've seen it twice before on a small screen, and now on a much larger one. It seems, I mean, maybe stating the obvious, but it's a much richer experience seeing it on the larger screen. Do you think documentaries are? I
think there's horses for courses.
Yeah.
But I think certainly the bigger the screen, the easier it is for you to tell a story. And I think, it kind of reflects what's going on in people's homes anyway now, doesn't it? Screens have got bigger during but when I started, screens were this big. And, everyone wanted just big close-ups to make an impact in a living room when this thing was in the corner with everything else going on. I think that's changed to some extent with the sort of TVs that people now watch stuff on. I've become obsessive about screen size, so I've got a projector at home, And I like the screen that size. That's probably just because I'm a cinematographer. But I think there's absolutely no doubt that it allows you to be much more interesting with your frames. You can use space much more. I don't know. It is yes, of course. And a bigger sound system helps too, especially when in a film about music.
Yeah, very good. Let's throw it out to the audience if we can. Let's. Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
One of the best arts docs that's ever been. This is one of the best art documentaries that's ever been made. It recalls the days of Monitor and South Bank Show and other series. I looked at IMDb, which, for better or worse, is the Bible of the industry, and it wasn't there.
No, it's not there because
this morning.
It's not there because nobody has wanted to buy it.
Oh,
the BBC
really?
it went quite a way up to the BBC hierarchy before the head of TV classical music said no, it's not for us. And we did get an offer from Sky Arts, but it was. I don't want to go too in the details, but it was a derisory offer. It was not. It would have cost us a lot of money to get the film ready for not a lot of money from Sky Arts. It's the film has a number of licensing costs involved. The E&O helped out a little bit. They had a bit of spare TV budget from thing, but it requires probably in the region of 30,000 quid to get all the licenses sorted out. So you can't. You have to at some point decide what are you doing with the film. Life goes on, and I've made 3 other films since then, and I think in the next week I'll hear whether there's another much bigger film coming my way. Again, there'll be no money in it, but it's a fascinating subject.
Well, I wish you the very, very best.
Thank you, and thank you for what you said.
Luck, really, but. Maybe there should be a campaign to get it on IMDb.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I bet things don't go onto IMDb until they've actually had some kind of official presence in the business.
Well, damn that BBC anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
The campaign starts here and now.
Yes, here and now.
How are the musicians?
You mean the orchestra? Or?
Yeah, notoriously
no, I mean...
tricky.
No, I think they were informed what we were doing. I mean, I can't even say yes or no about them. They did their job. They're professionals. But, I mean, even at our biggest, we were still a very low-profile unit. I have to say that. Even at the filming of the performance, there weren't a lot of us. And maybe that is an answer when you're going into these other cultural situations, is that sometimes there is a danger you take over. Because you've got this imperative, you've got your 3 cameras or 4 cameras and you've got to get good sound. I have to say also that Sandy, our sound guy, who was brought in at the last minute with his assistant, and I went to the theatre with him and I said, they're going to be all right. He went, okay. And I said, any problem? No, we can do that. And he also came in never having heard the opera before, never having seen it. Set up, shot, and gave us 32 tracks of beautiful sound. And that's lovely. When you're working with people like that, you realise how important our business is and how good we are in the UK at doing this and delivering stuff. Because, this is great tracks, and recording opera at the best of times is not easy. Because there's people clonking all over the stage, and because nobody wears mics. That's almost taboo in opera. I think Zach, somewhere at the back there, Zach had to wear a mic for one of his pieces. He's the high priest at the back, so that you can be heard. But other than that, there's no mics involved.
There's no mics.
It's not like musical comedy where at least you can take feeds from the mics that are in the hair.
Yeah.
None of that.
Yeah, because they're rampant in theatre, mics.
Yes, I know, but not in opera.
Yeah.
In opera, it's considered to be not the done thing.
Good for them. Any other questions? Yes, at the back there.
So Anthony seemed very charismatic. He seemed to be a great talker. How did he compare with other subjects that you've worked with? And did you have to do a lot to earn his trust, or did he just want to open up?
I don't know about trust. I presume. I really can't. I'm not sure I can answer that question. He was very easy to deal with, and he's done this a lot. He does a lot of interviews, so it wasn't really a problem. And some of his answers are quite sort of rote. My problem, in a sense, was trying to get him to go beyond the answers he'd already given in previous interviews. In terms of my other subjects, 2 of the 3 of the people that I have made films about, not in the millinery lesson, but some of the other people that I have had reputations that people would say, well, it's not going to work. You know, he doesn't like talking about his work. So you've just got to work on ways. I mean, there was one person who should remain nameless I made a film about. He's a painter, and he notoriously does not want to talk at a show. He doesn't even want to meet people when they have a new show of his work. And I formulated with him was that I would come down on the tube. He lived near Regent's Park. I would actually come on the tube with my camera stuff and my tripod, that I would leave it in the hallway, and we go out and have lunch and just chat about nothing or everything. And that only when we came back, if he felt that we had suddenly started talking about something interesting, then we'd set the camera up. And it took all the pressure off of him. Suddenly, it wasn't this guy turning up with a camera, oh, and I better do that. And slowly, over a number of weeks, he began to rather enjoy the process of not even opening up, but just somehow I decided with this particular film that as he would never talk about his work, that what I wanted to do was examine him through the things that he was interested in talking about, which weren't necessarily to do with art or painting. And it worked very well. And in the end, we made a beautiful film, and everyone said it was the first time ever anyone's really even understood what this guy is about. And the guy I've just been making the film with is quite a socially awkward person. He doesn't really like people. But again, we developed a bond over about 5 or 6 weekly sessions, whereby there is trust, yes, because everyone I'm dealing with knows I'm not going to screw them over. I'm not trying to make some expose. You know, I'm going in on the right level of niceness, and all I want to do in any of these films is make a film that is to that person's bonus. That doesn't make sense probably, but I want the best for the people I make my films about. And if one way or another a film about a painter encourages 3 other people to buy their paintings, then I'm extremely happy. So I think so far I have not met somebody who in the end I haven't made a film that I'm happy with, that they're happy with, and that has gone beyond just being a film about a guy putting marks on a canvas. I'm not sure. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so going back to Anthony, I mean, he's the opposite problem then, that he, as you say, he liked to talk, and the problem is getting beyond the stock answers. I'm a journalist. I know how hard that can be. Did you have any particular techniques for really getting?
No. I mean, I know. I mean, I would just ask the questions I wanted to ask. I didn't really want to. I'm with all the people that I've made the films with now, I do not in any way give them warning about what we're going to talk about. And I think if you just get a level of trust with people, in the end, you get there. And not to be afraid. You know, obviously there might be a boundary, but you might have done that in your research and realised there's one area that you're never going to go to. But there was a film I've done about another painter who, for all of his shows, when people say, what are your paintings about? He would always say, I'm not going to tell you. And we bought 2 or 3 of his paintings, and I got fed up with hearing him saying this to people at his shows. And again, I thought, okay, so we went out for lunch. I said, just have lunch together. It was quite a good lunch at Morano's. And I said to him, I think it's about time you did tell people. And he turned to me and he said, well, you know, Mike, he said, I'm getting on now, and I do feel I want to tell. I think I'd hit him at the right moment. And in the film, he does. It's essentially a terrible, terrible childhood that comes out of it that he's never told anyone before. And when it starts to happen, as a journalist, you'll know this. Again, it's just me and him in a room up in Norfolk. And suddenly the story starts coming out and you're just going, okay, here we go. We're there. We've got it. And there was some anxiety from the gallery owners afterwards about their artist telling this story. And he went back to his wife and showed his wife the film, and she said, "Don't change a thing. This is brilliant." So I probably have turned into a bit of a journalist in the sense that I am sniffing out what will make the film strong. I've noticed that in myself now. I'm more ruthless. We've all been in situations with cinematography, especially on documentaries, where the director says, "Look, I really just want to go for," and you think, "Oh God, you've got enough. Now I know you never have enough, ever." So, but you just got to learn that you've got to keep going as long as you can before but if your subject's tired, give up, because that's never going to work.
I mean, it is quite a specific skill, isn't it? Which is obviously one that you've mastered, because it's about asking the educated question as well as perhaps the stupid one. I mean, I say stupid, I mean, that those not involved in that particular artistic endeavour, they wouldn't know about that. So, and it feels like Anthony instinctively knows, just to explain how the muscles work in the throat and everything. It was.
But again, I do try and do a lot of foreground reading, or go online and read everything I can, and I don't always absorb it. But often I find that suddenly it pops up at the right time when you're because you're dealing with an expert often, and you're not the expert. But then suddenly it pops out, and you come up with it, and it works, and you think, "Yeah, good."
Some of them, all of them, and you be able to were looking straight down the lens, or it felt like it. Whereas others were off. Did you ask them to do that?
No, I've done. I thought with Anthony, I wanted him looking straight at the lens, because I thought that actually he would perform best if he performed to the camera. Mm-hmm. Some of the other films, because I'm using a small camera and it's often just held here, I asked everyone to look at me, and I might be slightly off, but I must admit I like the directness of the subject. Really, not looking. I don't think I've hardly ever used a sideways shot, which is very prevalent now in documentaries, because I find you lose all connectivity with the subject. And I think the more on the eye line that your subject is, I think you get deeper into the soul. Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. No, it is very strong. And the background to his main interview, which is as blank as can be, but with a character like that, you don't need.
No, that was a very definite decision. I do have a very big pull down screen for my projector, so that became the background.
Uh-huh.
And I've used it before as a white background, and just sort of shade it a little bit. But without a doubt, I think I don't really want. I do strip a lot of the backgrounds out in the other interviews I do. I tend to sort of move everything away, and so it's a very simple. So you do really concentrate on the. It depends on the structure of the film. If the film is creative in their milieu, and you might want to actually say something about that. But generally, for that kind of thing, especially for Anthony, I thought just straighten the camera, give him something to perform to.
He's a natural, isn't
he? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Nick?
I was just buried in there was a statement about remaining curious in life, and I picked that up. Curious and learning and keep learning, and the sort of existential rigour you had in that, and those wonderful moments at the end when he's climbing the stairs, so mindful and so present, and he has to be there, was wonderful, and you were learning that in a way as you went along. So it's great work, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick. It's very nice of you to say that. Thank you. And yes, I know what you mean about the mindfulness. And I think I battled with the end of the film in a sense, because the sequence that you see, which is the end of the film, is actually the end of Act 2. It's not the end of Act 3. But visually, that seems to be where you want to end your film. A man climbing stairs to wherever. And what it did allow me to do was use all the cameras on one particular moment in the opera and just allow you to just go with Anthony up the stairs and listen to what he said. And I've told this story before, but on Arena, with Alan Yentov in charge, and what all of us as young filmmakers, particularly Nigel Finch and myself, we always like to put a lot of we called it hanky-panky. You know, it's quite clever stuff and the artist frames sideways or whatever. But Yentov always used to say, when you've got hanky-panky, don't put anything on the soundtrack that it's important. And if you've got something on the soundtrack that's important, cut out the hanky-panky. And that's advice I've always listened to. And I think it's good advice. And I think the end of this film, there's not much hanky-panky. It is a man going up the stairs. And I hope, and really hope, that you do listen to what Anthony is saying at that point, because it is a big summing up of where this film, what this film is trying to say, and where he has got to as well.
Yeah, I mean, there was that moment where he says, and I want to not have the audience in the way he was saying, wasn't he? I just wanted to stop and enjoy the space, the silence that follows that. And I thought maybe you were going to give him that moment. But you went with the reality.
Well, I had to, because I extended it.
Yeah,
but in fact, the audience started to clap. Yeah. The moment that tab started to come down, they began to clap. So I just pulled it out of the track. We lost one chord from the score, from Phillips, because that was covered with applause. So I did try and squeeze that moment of silence out, but it should have been longer. Yeah, but hey, that's documentary for you.
Your next film can be completely silent.
Any more? Yes. In the centre back there.
Congratulations on the film. Is there anything you would have done differently if you had a budget?
Good question. I thought about that a lot, and I don't think there would have been much. There would have been moments where I would have dearly loved to have walked into the rehearsal room and gone to talk to Felim or one of the artists, and someone else set the cameras up.
So an assistant.
But only at that extent. And just recently with this film I've done with this painter in Streatham, I arrive and I've got my 4 cases of equipment and 2 tripods, and I have to take them out of the car then. You don't leave them in your car in Streatham. And there I am getting it, and I'm having to say to Giro, the painter, I'm saying, look, I'll be with you in a minute, Giro. And he's already made coffee and got some cakes. And I'd love to be able to just walk in and know that someone else was getting the gear out the car and doing the basic setups, getting the radio mics ready, and I could just be spending more time talking to my subject. But hey, that's not how it's going to happen. And I've probably these days the cameras are semi-assembled in the case. I have to do very little. All the leads are plugged in. So at least I don't have to spend a lot of time setting up. But I don't like that setting up time. I want to be with the person I'm making the film with. But in terms of your overall question, I'm not sure in the end what a bigger budget would have done. What a bigger budget might have done is given us the budget to license the music straight up and get this out to festivals where we could show it. But of course, we can only show it at events like this where you aren't being asked to pay an admittance fee. You are essentially a private audience. This is essentially a private viewing.
But I suppose the look of the film is determined by that right from the beginning, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, you make decisions about cinematography, and it's about, with the cinematography, it's about knowing what your camera is capable of, shooting raw and log and all those systems to give yourself as much flexibility as possible. And then when you time it, really trying to add atmospheres and time moving through via your colour grading.
But am I right as well in thinking, I don't remember seeing many GVs. Was that deliberate?
Yeah,
or is it more intimate without them? Almost?
I think it is in this case. In this case, you've got big GVs of the stage when you want to see the whole ensemble, when you want to see the shape of the performance. But yeah, I mean, I think we had the couple of Stuart, the CEO of the ENO, had a drone above the Colosseum, so he gave us the drone shot. So I stuck them in, because it was a way of saying Colosseum. But I could have just gone across the road in St Martin's Lane and just shot a GV of the thing. But generally, a GV has got to say something. Otherwise, and as long as the audience is clear where you are, and sometimes you've got to say to yourself, did the audience even need to really know? That's not what this sequence is about.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it reminds me of all the times doing documentaries where you had to get up and shoot a sunrise because it's just like...
Oh, yes. How many sunrises have we filmed?
Do we really?
And how many sunrises have we actually seen in the final cut?
Exactly.
Very few.
Yeah. But any more questions? No? I mean, it's an enormous privilege to get that access to someone's life, and I think personally, that's one of the things I miss about doing documentaries, and that immersion in the shooting process, and it's very heartening and inspiring, Mike, to see that you've returned to it with such gusto and to such effect. Thank you very much indeed,
Well, thank
Mike.
you,
It's been
Mike.
a real,
it's been a real pleasure, and I'm glad everybody's enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.